If you know me, you'll know I love my facts and figures, my careful analysis, my reasoned conclusions. Well, there's none of that today. This is just my gut feel, what I sense in the ether that's going on in the watch media, and in particular the watch social media. Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches, and this is my kind of sense of what is going on in the watch media these days. I don't consume a huge amount of detail. I'm very choosy about what videos I watch, what podcasts I listen to, what articles I read, but I scan huge amounts. I subscribe to, I think I counted like 200 different YouTube channels and podcasts and webs and blogs and things like that. So I see what is being discussed, even though if I don't necessarily watch every video, etc., etc. And that's given me a sense of what's going on. Now, I could be completely wrong, and if I'm open to being told I'm wrong. So I have not sat down and carefully tabulated anything. This is very much gut feel, but I figured it was an interesting topic, so here we are. The first thing is that I've noticed sort of growing, and I have mentioned this before, is the social in social media has never been more important. Whether it's the big boys like Fratello and Revolution, Monochrome, Time and Tide coming together for shared videos, or tiny little producers with very small subscriber counts banding together and doing collabs, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's podcasts, the idea of cooperation, collaboration, joint production between multiple content producers has never been bigger. Yes, some people, and also I would say, and the inclusion of live streams, live comments. Some people, like Jory at the Time Teller, have been doing this for some time. I think Archie did or does a fair bit of this, but now it's just widespread. It's uniform across so many platforms and so many producers. The next thing I'd say is there's lots more videos of watching people where the wristwatches are not central to the story. Whether that's particularly more than anyone else, you'd say there's sort of, the first thing I'd say is you've got those like slice of life things. And the classic here would be Timepiece Gentleman. He owns that area. He's almost running a Netflix style video of watch me do my job, whether that's hiring someone, firing someone, dealing with customers. Oh, by the way, there's watches here as well. Roman Schaff has got in on that a little bit. Adrian from Bark and Jack has always edged close to that. I think he's doing more and more of that with some of his more recent coffee stuff. The guy from the Timeless Watch channel, he does a lot of that stuff, what it's like living and breathing and just getting on with life in Italy. So as I say, this is really popular and it's growing, and I think we're going to see a lot more of it. Okay, so if that's what's coming in, what's dropping off? The first thing I'd say is there seems to be less and less coverage around micro brands. I'd sort of talking about micro brands rather than the media side of it. I've been sensing that the great glory days of a new micro brand coming up every couple of months seem to be behind us. The big micro brands like Zelos and Farah and Christopher Ward have now just become brands. On a day where Federico, a serious watch dealer, will do a video where he talks about Zelos as being a cheap brand that gets serious kudos from collectors, you know that Zelos has moved past a certain level. And I think that's true across the board. When Revolution does an article and says and lists amongst its micro brands to watch, people like Ming that are averaging 2,000 and 3,000 Swiss francs, and other brands like Satori Ballard, I think it is, with artisanal watchmakers as micro brands, you know that the well is running dry. You know that something is changing there. I think that the topic of micro brands is really dying down, and we've just got a new batch of brands that we talk about now. 2 years ago, all the talk was about fashion watches, why they're good, why they're bad, why they're terrible, how to identify them. One of the things I've noticed is no one really talks about that anymore. They crop up every now and then, but it's not really much of a discussion point. Likewise, the idea of homage watches is kind of no longer a topic for discussion. I think the community seems to have reached the point now where we say, we know what a homage watch is, you're either for it or against it. What you want to do is entirely up to you. It's not a debate anyone wants to have anymore. I'd also say that inter-channel drama, inter-platform drama has completely died. A couple of years ago, Archie versus someone else, someone at TGV versus someone else, what was going on in the TGV Facebook community, who had TGV ripped off, content from this week. All of that used to be huge. I dabbled in it a little bit in the very early days because it was great clickbait and it was kind of interesting what was going on in the media in that space. But I noticed I kind of got tired of it really fast. I didn't like the direction it took, so I pulled back from doing that. And I noticed almost across the board, everyone else is as well. I think one of the other things that's driving it is the next point I'm going to raise, which is there seems to be an increasing stratification or increasingly strong swim lanes for media producers. If you talk about affordable watches, there's a group of you that talks about affordable watches. If you talk high end, there's a group of people that talk about high-end watches. If you talk about the uncanny valley in the middle, then there's people who talk about that. But they don't seem to cross over, and they all pretty much stay in their lanes. They'll collaborate, but there's very little commenting about what's going on across channels, across groups. Everyone seems to have sort of, as I said, apart from when they work together, everyone seems to have found their track and just stick to it. One particularly strong track I'd notice would be what I call Rolex Tube. This little band of channels that all do talk to each other and about each other, but primarily it's all based around Rolex. That one brand, that one group of like half a dozen watches that they're constantly talking about and just constantly weaving in and out. And it seems to be almost completely isolated from everyone else. They talk to themselves, but no one else really mentions them much anymore, except as a bit of a sideshow, which is really quite interesting. The other thing which I would say is certainly dropping off is the social media output of the big watch companies, whether it's Hodinkee or Worn and Wound or Time and Tide. Their social media output, the things that they put out on Instagram, for example, or particularly on YouTube, has really dropped back. They're focusing more and more on their own websites, their own media channels, and it's like they don't want to share any ad revenue, any sponsorship revenue with Google in particular. So I've really noticed those guys pulling back on what they share for free or what they share on someone else's platform. And they're still putting out huge amounts of content, but it's increasingly focused on their own sites. Okay, so that's what's gone, what's come, and now we'll talk about some old favorites that just aren't going anywhere. And the first is obviously Rolex, talking about Rolex, how to get one, how to sell one, how to make sure it's not fake, how to make sure it is fake. Whatever it is you want to talk about Rolex, that is still there. It's still by far the most powerful Google juice in the watch media world. The next would be lists. Lists continue to be popular. The three watches you should buy, the 5 watches you shouldn't buy, the 10 watches you've never heard of, which we've all heard of before, etc., etc. They continue to be big. They continue to be popular. The next would be watch reviews. They continue to form the staple, even with collabs and everything growing up. Just your solid, dependable review of watches continues to be popular and continues to be the mainstay of what we do. The one other thing I would notice is that brands' own social media continues to suck. Whether it's on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, the content they put out by and large is terrible. The level of engagement that they have with the consumer is appalling. And all in all, they still don't really seem to understand how to be media producers. One thing I would say has massively changed, though, is that the big brands, the Swiss brands, are really learning how to leverage other people's production. Whether it's the chief designer of Breitling turning up on a podcast, whether it's the CEO of IWC or Omega or Longines or senior people from Moser, these guys are now everywhere. They are turning up on podcasts, on YouTube channels, on Zoom meetings. They're just everywhere. I think a lot of that is post-COVID. They didn't have any other way of getting stuff out, so they chose to just do it, or they were forced to do it, and they've discovered it works, and they're just keeping on. And I think another part of it is that they just have cottoned on that this is an effective way of getting their story across, that people warm to people that they understand. If I've got some sense of the person behind the brand, I can kind of get on board with the brand a bit more. Whatever it is, I think it's a bit of all of that. We're seeing the brands, whilst their internal, their own product sucks, at least they're getting out there and getting into other people's production, which I think is probably better than nothing. So anyway, quick video. They're the kinds of things I've noticed. Do you reckon I'm wrong? Have I missed the boat? Have I just not gone to the right places to see things? Have I misinterpreted the data? Or do you largely agree with me and say, yeah, that does seem to be what's going on? I suppose what I'd also like to know is, what would you like to see? What kind of media do you think is missing? Where would you like to see people take watch YouTube channels or Instagram feeds or podcasts? What would you like to see happen there? That would actually be really interesting as well. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches, and I'll see you later. Bye.